Underneath the lantern by the barrack gate, darling, I remember the way you used to wait. 'Twas there that you whispered tenderly that you loved me. You'd always be my lily of the lamplight, my own Lily Marleen. Vor der Kaserne, vor der großen Tor, stand eine Laterne und steht sie noch davor. So wollen wir uns da wiedersehen, bei der Laterne wollen wir stehen, wie einst Lili Marleen, wie einst Lili Marleen. Bugles tonight, don't play the call to arms. I want another evening lying in your arms. Oh, please let me linger just a while to be with you, to hold you tight, my lily of the lamplight, my own Lily Marleen. Mit dir, Lily Marleen, wie einst Lily Marleen.
So we're going to swing you through Bye Bye Blackbird.
Pack up all my cares and woe, here I go, swinging low. Bye bye, blackbird, where somebody waits for me. Sugar is sweet and so is she. Bye bye, my blackbird, no one here can love and understand me. Oh, what hard luck stories they all hand me. Make my bed and light the light, I'll arrive late tonight. Blackbird, bye bye. I go singing low. Bye bye blackbird. Where somebody waits for me, sugar is sweet and so is she. Bye bye my blackbird. No one here can love and understand me. Oh, what hard luck stories they all hand me. Oh, make my bed, light the light, I'll arrive late tonight. Blackbird, bye bye. Blackbird, bye bye. Hello and welcome back to the last episode of The Girls We Left Behind. I'm with Mary McCartan and Bob Quick, and hopefully you have watched the previous shows that we've done, and you'll know that we've covered a huge amount of topics with the change to women's lives in the last 100 years. If I ever think about putting myself back those 100 years, I don't know that I could have coped. I suppose you cope in the situation that you have to, but can I say I am very fond of the dishwasher. I'm very fond of the microwave. I'm not fond of the vacuum cleaner because I prefer it if someone else uses it. But if we think back, we didn't have the houses that we have now. You know, we've a lot of us have houses that are really too big.
Yes.
We don't need them to be the size that they are. And keeping a house in some ways may have been simpler because of the times that families and men and women were living in.
That's true.
But also as in terms of hygiene and sewerage systems, water, flowing water,
Yes.
all of that, it must have been horrendous.
I mean, there are certain things that struck me today when I was getting ready to come to do this show. And I iron my own shirts, can I say? I iron my own shirts. And I bought a shirt in a January sale. And I went to iron it.
Was it a good bargain?
It was a great bargain, it was.
He can shop as well.
Shop. Aren't I just the perfect man? Come on, girls, give me a break. And this shirt wouldn't iron. I thought, what the dickens is wrong with this shirt? Well, look, it was 100% cotton iron, 100% cotton. You see, so I had to wet it all that time and get it. And I remember a conversation with my mum saying that my father was a civil servant, worked in an office, 5 of us at school, so she was ironing 24 to 30 shirts a week, and she said the biggest change in her life was polycotton shirts.
Oh, yes.
That went zip, 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 zip. And when I was ironing this cotton shirt, I thought, imagine having to iron 30 of these boys.
Yeah.
You know,
And not probably with, well, definitely not with a lightweight iron.
No.
It just glided along.
So it's things like that, and given the fact that women still do the vast majority of domestic chores, I accept that, it's easier now than it was 40 years ago, wasn't it?
Of course, there's lots of non-iron material too, which is fantastic. I see recently the police forces and uniforms and all have moved now to those more, like the sports gear.
Yes,
it doesn't need ironed.
Yeah,
brilliant stuff.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
even throwing something into the tumble dryer, and then the minute it stops, take it out, give it a wee shake, and hang it up. I love it. That your story about the shirt, Bob, reminded me of a lady from way down in Cork, and it probably was maybe 50 years, 60 years ago that this happened, but it was a comment in church at a mass, and this girl that I know heard her mother's comment on a gentleman's shirt and how well it was ironed, but it was doesn't Mary Ann iron a good shirt? There was no idea that anyone else had ironed it, but the fact that it was ironed to within an inch of its life, so he was beautifully turned out because his wife had turned him out in that shirt.
Well, we have that argument at home when we go to go out somewhere and Paul will put on some sort of a shirt and I'd say, you can't go out in that. He says, why, your shirt's fine. And I said, well, somebody will say that I didn't iron it right. I'm not going to iron it.
No.
But,
And would you make him go and change it?
No, you don't make him do anything. No.
Oh, right.
No, I believe in everybody having their own autonomy, really.
Well,
yes.
I have to say, if I'm probably a wee bit more delicate with the kids, but if Thomas is happy enough to go out in that's if you're happy to go out
Absolutely.
in that,
You do
that's
it.
100%.
You're responsible
The
for
kids
yourself.
sometimes, I think.
But I think
just get
society
really-
might still say she doesn't know how to iron the
Oh,
shirt.
and you know what? I'm fine with that. I'm absolutely fine if it's not ironed well enough to someone else's expectations.
Well, I can give you a
I'm
concrete
happy with
example of that. Do you remember that? I think it was the first jazz festival that we did, and when I got out to conduct the big band, I discovered I'd lifted 2 black shoes from a wardrobe, but I'd lifted 2 left shoes. So I conducted them in a dress suit and a pair of trainers.
Yes.
And I had to say to the audience, if you're looking at my strange dress, and I told them the story, and Melanie said when she was in the ladies at the interval, two older ladies were there and said, don't you think his wife would have checked that type of thing? And that's a
The
true story.
judgments.
That's a true story.
I have often said to parents that, have cared for, don't you worry about what they're saying, because when I tell you, they will not be up sitting at night when your child's crying or when they
No.
need the shoes on their feet,
Yeah.
but it is, we do worry about what people say. We
Sure.
have to appreciate it, but really they are not worth worrying about. But
Definitely
anyway,
not. But I do think that's maybe something comes with age as well.
maybe.
Maybe 20 years ago I would have been much more like nervous and anxious about myself. Generally, if you want to think something, you're quite welcome to think it. But I do think that that's me being more comfortable in myself.
I think COVID lockdown has finished it all together. We've sorted it all out from that, so who cares?
Who cares? As long as we're healthy and well in here.
You made a very interesting statement, Gerda, in the 3rd episode, which was if your grandparents or great-grandparents were parachuted into now, would they recognise our lives? After 1920 to 2020, would they recognise? And I have to say, my granny, I'm sure, wouldn't.
Well, imagine, our language has changed. We talk in a whole different language. People walking around talking into phones.
Yes.
As far as they're saying, walking around talking into lumps of metal. It's
Yeah.
bizarre.
Even going out for a meal and you're just looking at a phone, or very often be looking at a phone.
That's right.
Totally different. The roads, the infrastructure, the appliances in the house. I remember as a child, Dad and I used to go and visit this man who he was like an adoptive grandfather. Just loved him so much. I had an outside toilet. I was horrified. I thought, well, what do you do in the middle of the night? You're supposed to go out. He had a kettle that hung over the wee open fire.
Yeah. Wow.
He was the most amazing and lovely man. And he lived a very simple life, and we'd cycle down to our house every Saturday and spoil the 7 children, or the 7 of us, with chocolates and sweets and stuff that I'm sure he had saved up for a long time to buy. And when Dad and I would go and visit him, he used to have a wee plastic money bag, and he'd be putting 2 peas and 1 piece into it. Now that was great, because I used to be able to go down to Quinn's shop and buy 4 chewits for a penny.
That's right.
So if I had 10p, I had 40 chewits.
Yeah.
And giving the dentists great business.
Yeah.
But I just think that when he came into our house, and Mummy or probably made him a cup of tea or that sort of thing, it wasn't a kettle hanging over the fire. It was an electric kettle and tea bags and all the rest.
Yeah.
So the advances and what they must, if they came back.
Well, it was like you saying about women, it must have been horrible not to have the vote and not to have, but actually they didn't know any of those things. It's like saying to them, like, your grandchildren will be flying about in metal boxes in the sky. When they take a notion of wanting sunshine, they just go for the week to Spain, or saying that they won't, if their family are in Australia, they can talk to them every day and see them every day through through not even what looks like a television box now. It's like a piece of metal sitting there in your body. They wouldn't know what you're talking about. It was bizarre stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
I suppose if we look, and we can't avoid but talk about the horrendous reality in Ukraine, but if we look at people just like us who are having to up and leave their comforts, or who are hiding in bunkers or cellars under their houses, they're living the horror that we would think if we weren't able to have the running water, if we weren't able to have the food weren't able to have heating, and it's minus 10, minus 12
Yeah,
in
absolutely.
some of those areas.
Yes.
We're very soft. We've
We're
become
privileged, we are.
very privileged.
And of course, it has affected directly this show, in that part of the show was supposed to be a connection with some Russian extended family of mine, talking about their experience of the First World War and how it impacted Russian society leading up to the 1917 Russian Revolution, of course. But we took the decision we wouldn't do that because we've no media contact with Russia now, and it would potentially expose my extended family to sanctions from. So that's just gone, because you think we can't take the risk for something as in their world as trivial as this. I can't expose them to potential sanction.
And that's what changes very quickly. It changed in the United States very quickly as well, with when the change of, the ability to actually voice your opinion, or even to voice anything.
Yes.
In any country. And when you talk about Ukraine, it could be us. I mean, things can change very quickly.
It's a very thin veneer, isn't it?
It is a very thin
They
veneer.
talked about, was it Mariupol last night, how things have got, they just said it's primitive. It's back to the Stone Age in Mariupol, and you think, goodness, a fortnight ago it was is as Omar is, a functioning 21st century city, and within a fortnight it's back to
and a natural
basics.
disaster can do that too.
Yes,
Only
yes.
it's easier to help out in natural
Yes.
disasters than it is in war.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I think I'm definitely guilty. Well, I am guilty of. You see some horrific tragedies, natural disasters, man-made disasters, say in the third world, and it's so sad. And those people have struggled their whole lives. But I always wrongly have felt a bit of a disconnection with that, because I live in a privileged world, and I find it more confronting now that
Absolutely.
Ukraine, it's people like us, and I'm not saying that we are any better. We're definitely no better than any third world country or any person who lives in those third world conditions. But all of a sudden, that could be us.
Yeah.
But the third world might be able to accommodate quicker. They might be fit to recover quickly.
Yeah.
Like the higher you climb, the further you fall,
Yeah.
and it really,
absolutely.
we have our young people, and even ourselves, really have lost any skills for survival.
Yeah.
Where at least a child who hasn't had those privileges has some opportunity to survive.
Yeah.
But a lot of our young people wouldn't have, as I say, they'd hardly know how to boil an egg, never mind, and that's, now, I shouldn't say that for young people, that could have been in any generation. There's lots of wonderful young people who can do so many things. I have a great respect for the youth we have. Absolutely great.
So
I think we have a great generation coming up behind us,
absolutely.
but we have disadvantaged them because we haven't given them any exposure to survival skills at all.
Well, sure, why would you, Mary? I mean, given the privileged world that we live in, you assume it's going to go on forever, and so you just live the life. And I have to say, like Gerda, I felt ashamed of myself because of the effect that the footage from Ukraine had on me. And like Gerda, I realised, why is this affecting me? Because they look like I look like. They've got the same clothes, they've got the backpacks, they look like us, and here they are in this situation. And that's not something I'm very proud of, I have to say, that my reaction to that. But it's
a reality, and I mean it's looking with a real view to how it's all progressing in front of our eyes. It's desperately sad. It's desperately sad, and yet, well, no, it's desperately sad. Full stop. And we, in our lives where we are now, we are so privileged. We are so fortunate in the life that we live. And even 100 years ago, with all the work that you're doing with the DNA and that, we're finding these people again. And I suppose you can't immerse yourself in the sadness of world matters. We are important as to how this all progresses. but we have to live within our own
You,
life
well,
as well.
the DNA is interesting because it actually does hold memory. It does alter with life experiences. It alters with trauma. It alters with pain. It alters. So we do carry some of that pain with us. And you're not sure why you react to a certain situation. Maybe it's because of the famine you react to something that's going on in Ukraine. Because we do have a certain individual memory, but also we have a collective memory that goes along, you know, through.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Through the DNA.
Through the DNA. So it's not like conscious memory. I'm not talking, you know, but our fight, flight, or freeze sort of responses are, yeah. So it's very interesting. There's, well, you know, it's not mainstream healing, but lots of healing looks at. And we've seen it in many different indigenous, you know, communities right across the world, where you know, what is the family history? Because there may be some sort of major trauma in that history that you know, if there has been something happened that family have taken on shame. So okay, there may be some DNA thing with that, but there's also that each generation passes down that shame, or anger, or hurt, or resentment. You know, that affects the body and can affect illnesses and things as well. So, but we do know, and very clearly now, that trauma, you know, it's, especially early childhood trauma, there's a higher incidence of all the diseases in adulthood. So you know,
this
we really
will continue. So basically, what you're saying is that we carry the DNA of our ancestors. So part of the last 100 years is in us.
Is in us.
Sitting here.
We're
But
inextricably linked
Yes.
with 100 years ago.
Yeah, we are. And also we have the capability of healing that in each generation as
Yes.
well.
Yes.
So that's, and what saddens me most about Ukraine, the thing that causes me real ache, is that here we are creating a whole generation of children that may hate.
Yeah.
You know, and in one swoop, we've created another generation that hates.
Yes, for sure.
So have
And
we,
Russians as well.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
I mean, yeah.
So the big question that we could ask, and definitely are not going to be able to answer, is what have we learned over the last 100 years? Here we are back on the cusp of another huge war, and please God, not.
Yep.
Mary, thank you so much
You're very welcome.
for joining us on The Girls We Left Behind.
Lovely.
There is a question that is more than 100 years old.
Wow.
The
should we
next,
hit?
it's the title of the next song that we're going to have from Philea Sophia.
Okay.
And Mary, I don't know how long we would need to answer this question, but what can a young lassie do with an old man? What can a lassie do with a man? What can a young lassie do with an old man? I mean, it's
That's the song title,
centuries old, and that's the song
Do you know
title.
what, all that came to my head was the Eagles song, Lion Eyes.
What can a young lassie do with an old man? Answers on a postcard, please.
From the lovely Philea Sophia.
Thank you, Mary.
What can a young lassie do with an old man? What can a young lassie do with an old man? He must have some money, and that's the whole game. Shame for that lovely young girl. What can a young lassie, what shall a young lassie, what can a young lassie do with an old man? I luck on the penny that tempted my Minnie to sell her per jenny for silver and Dane. I luck on the penny that tempted my Minnie to sell her poor Jenny for silver and Dane. He's always complaining from morning to evening. He hoards and he hipples the weary day long. He's dolt and he's dozing, his blood it is frozen. Oh, dreary the night where the feckless feckless old man. He's doled, he's dozing, his blood it is frozen. Oh, dreary the night with a feckless old man. What can an old fella do with a young lassie? What can an old fella do with a young lassie? Pray for a miracle. Pray for a miracle. Pray for a miracle. He hums and he hankers, he frets and he cankers. I never can please him, do all that I can. He's peevish and jealous of all the young fellas who duel on the day that I met an old man. He's peevish and jealous of all the young fellas who duel on the day that I met an old man. What can a young lassie do with an old fella?
Hello and welcome to episode 4 of the Culture Show, The Last Interview, which of course is the fabulous Mr. Mike Reynolds. You've just heard the Robbie Burns number, What Can a Young Lassie Do with an Old Fella? And here to prove exactly that, if it's possible, is Gerarda McCann and Mike Reynolds.
I say thank you.
Typifying that Robbie Burns poem.
Yeah.
Mike Reynolds, of course, long-term, very good close friend of mine, godfather to my youngest son, and the only man in Oma that understands a single word I say.
Which is why we're actually going to have subtitles when the two of you get talking.
Thank you for that, Gerarda. So, always supportive, thank you for that. Mike, of course, from West Yorkshire, and I'm from the North Riding of Yorkshire. And we're here to talk about Mike's maiden aunts, which is a theme of these interviews. Mike, what were the name of your maiden aunts?
2 aunts. There's 4 girls in the family.
Okay.
One of the girls is my mum. One of them died quite young, and the 2 maiden aunts are Annie and May Vince.
Annie and May, okay.
Yeah.
That's the equivalent of my Auntie Flossie and Auntie Ivy, who were born similar time. And as we've talked throughout this series, there were so many men killed across the whole of Europe in the First World War that many of these ladies didn't have the opportunity to marry and have families and things. So they were our maiden aunts. And
my maiden aunts, Aunt Tilly and Aunt Minnie.
Uh-huh.
You know, Great Aunt Tilly and Great Aunt
Yes.
Minnie.
Right.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and
Right.
formidable ladies.
Yeah, absolutely.
And single ladies, and that was all I would ever think. They were formidable characters.
Yes.
Yes.
And
yeah.
now, with research that we've done with this and conversations, you think, yeah, well, you had a tough time.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
you lived through a tough
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as Mary McCartan was saying, these ladies were more financially independent than before because, Mike, your aunts worked initially in the Standards firework factory in Huddersfield.
That's right, Bob, that's right. We lived, all the family lived within a stone's throw of the Standards firework factory.
Or a rocket strike, as you would say.
Yes. And every day they'd have a test firing of rockets and Roman candles and things. So, although it was daylight, we had a free sound and light show.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
Every day?
Yeah, every day.
Goodness.
Yeah.
Goodness.
The 2 aunts earned a living initially from being in the woolen mills. Different woolen mills made different types of material, different clothes. And Annie was a weaver, and she was a very fine weaver.
Okay.
And May was a mender. A mender is someone who corrects any mistakes that come out in the cloth. Yarn may break halfway through the 70-yard length of the cloth,
Okay.
and it's the mender puts that.
Back on there, whatever it was.
Yeah,
Okay. Well,
sure.
Well,
And later on, they became munitions workers for Standard Fireworks. I don't know what it's probably called that at the time, Standard
Yes.
Fireworks, but they made armaments for
In 39-45.
yeah, 39-45, yeah.
Yeah.
And they changed their safe job in the mill to a dangerous job in munitions
Okay.
because it was more pay.
Yes.
The pay was higher, and they were
Okay.
just buying a house, a family house at that time.
Yeah.
And the focus, the family history is one of the aunts was lent £30 as a deposit for the house, for a brand new house.
Yeah.
£30 bought the house, deposit for it.
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah. And as we talked about before, that was for a lot of women, that was the first time that they had financial security.
That's right.
Because they
yeah.
were suddenly able to, and for these ladies particularly, they weren't going to have husbands. They didn't know this at this time, but not having husbands, they had to earn a living.
Yeah.
So, and was Standard Fireworks, had that been in Huddersfield a long time at this stage?
As far as I know, I haven't looked up the history of it, but it's been there since ever I was remember.
Yes.
Since ever I put a banger through somebody's trouser leg or something.
Yeah, I don't believe that. Yeah.
But the other, with your aunts, you know, and this has been a thread that's gone through all of the interviews as
Yes.
well. They had jobs, you know, they were working in the woolen mills and doing all of that, and then stepped out of that world that was very, very familiar to them and into munitions.
Yes.
That's right.
You know,
yeah.
and it was, well, we have to survive, we have to have workers, therefore
Yeah.
we have to step
Yeah.
up,
Yeah.
which is, we know that the men were all going, and unfortunately millions of them were killed from all over the world heading to the war, and that was horrendous. And the women were stepping out of normal lives that they had
Yes.
and stepping up as well. You know, that must have been a huge change to their structure of life.
Yeah, it takes a lot to do that normally for anyone to make such a drastic change to your life and realise that you're in control of finances, of obtaining the finances to pay the bills, to put food on the table, and just do it. So yeah, they became minor managers, I think,
Yes.
in many ways. And I hear of from other ladies when we lived in Huddersfield, there was resentment when the men came back.
Okay.
The men wanted their jobs back,
Yes.
Yeah.
and not have a lady working on a lathe, a metal turning
Yes.
lathe.
Yes.
And then did they want the ladies to just, you know, resort back to
type,
homemakers
yeah.
or admin?
Typists
That's
and
right.
secretaries and things. Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah,
Yeah.
just housewives. Yeah.
Yes.
Challenged by
Oh, I would think so, yes. Well, the social change, because, I mean, as we talked about with Mary, the women got the vote in 1918, so it was a rapidly changing world where women were becoming breadwinners, voters, and freed from that the rule of domesticity, I suppose.
Yes, that's right.
And able to do that, and obviously saying, hey, we quite like this. This is
Yeah.
okay. I don't want to go back and be a, you know. And for this whole generation, a million or so ladies who weren't going to get married, they needed some sort of career, or you know. And
Yeah.
my aunt Ivy, who was my example of a maiden aunt that I knew most growing up, ran a boarding house in Scarborough, my hometown, a seaside resort. Took in visitors. And the strange model that they all used was if you had 4 or 5 rooms to let, all those visitors brought their own food and gave it to the landlady, who then cooked it. So the ladies were cooking 5 completely separate meals every night,
Oh, wow.
every breakfast time and at midday as well.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that was
mind-boggling.
that was a hard ticket.
Absolutely.
I look back and think it wasn't a great business plan, girls, to be honest. But I suppose it was cheaper for the people who were coming,
needs
and
must at the time.
money was short.
Yeah.
Well, again, in those days, Bob, food was still on ration. So
Yes.
you had a ration book, and if it was 4 coupons for an OXO cube, that's what it was,
Yes,
and that's
yeah.
all you got.
Yes,
So you were limited
Yes.
in the food that you could buy.
yes.
Sure.
Yeah, yeah. I heard one particular strange guy saying when they said, what would you do if it was rationing? He said, oh, no problem, I just go to the fish and chip shop. Which is slightly bizarre. And what about the menfolk, Mike, in 1914, 18?
Yeah, 1418. Well, I had my grandfather was in the First World War. He was wounded, suffered a head wound, and was invalided out of the service, no longer fit for active service. And he was put in a different uniform. He was still under army orders or command, and as were lots of other wounded men, and they were put in munition factories.
Oh, they also worked. Right.
They worked and got the army pay, not the civilian pay.
Okay, and was he back in Huddersfield, the same place as your aunts, or not then?
No, he was from Nottingham when he joined the army,
Okay.
volunteered for the First World War. He ended up in Manchester,
Okay.
working at Ferranti's factory. I'm not sure what they made other than
Yes,
munitions.
yeah.
Okay. And ended up walking when the war work was finished, no longer needed. He ended up walking from Manchester to the seaside town of Blackpool. Oh, sorry, Fleetwood.
Oh, Fleetwood, yeah.
Yeah, which homed a fishing fleet.
Yep.
And the one thing that was more dangerous than being in the army in the First World War was being a fisherman
Okay.
on deep sea trawlers.
Yes, yeah.
He lost his life there.
Wow.
The boat went down, and with all hands.
Oh, goodness.
So my granny was left again,
Yes.
manless and
a
husbandless.
girl that was left behind.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
yeah.
right.
And did your granny then go? She obviously had to go and work, then, did she? She had to.
No, my dad had to leave school and take up a job. He was a delivery cyclist on a
Wow.
bike, and I had another aunt who I'm not sure what she did, but everyone had to give up what they were doing and earn money to pay
Yes.
the bills.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Different days again.
Different days,
Different days.
and my granny, she had to deal with the main. One of the main things in her life was not only did her husband die, there was no word of them. The ship went down somewhere off Iceland,
Wow.
and they're never seen again. It just didn't come back.
It just disappeared. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know why it was it damaged, or because whenever you said more dangerous to be or as dangerous to be out on fishing trawlers, I was thinking, is that from a bombing point of view?
Oh no,
But
no.
no.
Just
It was just the way they were made. They're by today's standards, they were very flimsy.
Okay.
It was a dangerous employment. There was no safety rails on the ship, things like that.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's why it was so dangerous. No radar.
Not much radio contact, really, presumably. Or
Very little.
Primitive radio contact.
Primitive
in
in-
those days, yes.
To Scotland, yeah.
Yes, yeah, and of course in those days it was before the social contract with the government in the 40s, before the welfare state.
Absolutely.
So there was no pensions, there was no help for people in that situation. They just you sank or swam by your own efforts.
That's right, and that was one of the tragedies, that the second tragedy that the family faced. Not only did they lose the breadwinner, their grandfather, or my grandfather, their father, the granny was put out of the house
Goodness me.
because
Yes.
it was signed for by my grandfather.
Oh, wow.
So then he died. Therefore
He died.
She had no right.
That's
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
and that's when the change came. They came back to Huddersfield. They had connections
Oh, okay, yeah.
with the
of course.
mills, and
Family members. To
family
help.
members, yeah.
Family
I'll speak for you. You'll get a
Yeah.
job with us, you know.
Cruel times. weren't they?
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, again, what we talked about with Mary McCartan, women's rights. Just you couldn't sign for a house, so you were thrown on the street.
Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah,
I
That's
think
right.
women
Indeed.
had to be the idea that's come through all of this so adaptable. You know,
Yes.
the men, soldiers going out in war, going out on the fishing trawlers, very much focusing on, okay, do what has to be done to support the family. The women's lives, I think, as I already said, more so was adapting.
Yes.
You know, I can't just continue to
Yeah.
do this. I can't just
Yeah.
continue to be the homemaker or
Yes.
the mother, and adapting all of the time,
Yes.
positively and negatively.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
the house is gone.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yay, tricky.
Absolutely.
Well,
Absolutely.
you mentioned earlier my uncles.
Yes.
This was a family of 7, so 4 girls and three boys. And during the Second World War, the eldest uncle, he was in the RAF doing plane maintenance between sorties. But he did start life in a mill, working with the cloth and wool,
Yeah.
and went back to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
In 46, yeah.
In
okay.
46.
Yeah.
The second eldest boy, he was in the army during the Second World War. He was in the Royal Engineers
Okay.
and spent most of his service in Malta. I think trapped in Malta.
Oh.
So there was no leave or...
No.
Yeah,
Well,
sure.
that was Hope. What were the Faith, Hope and Charity were the 3 planes, weren't they, on Malta?
That's right, yeah,
They fought the Germans with.
yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So there's, and my uncle, who was in the RAF, there was hardly any leave for them. They couldn't afford leave.
No.
How to get from one end of England to the other,
Yes, yeah,
and
okay.
then
Yeah.
he ended up in Germany.
Yeah. And again, the women at home providing and carrying the whole burden for
Yeah,
the family.
that's right.
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Mike, and all the stories of your family and back to your grand, I haven't heard any mention of music yet.
No, there was I was the first one.
Were you the first one?
Yeah, I broke the mold. I told my dad I wanted to learn an instrument because it was just coming out, free instrument tuition at
Yeah.
school.
Yeah.
And I said, well, they've only got violins, Dad. And he said, well, a violin it will be.
Yeah.
And it cost £5, which you could pay in 6pence a week, I think it was, to buy this violin and get lessons from a professional. And many's the time I said, Dad, I want to stop this. I want to end this. And there's no such thing as ending it.
No.
Yeah, and it went on. And from violin playing and viola playing, I went on to clarinet playing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And then saxophone playing.
Yeah. Okay. I mean that to me, Mike, is as a an ardent brass player. The real tragedy of your life is you grew up in West Yorkshire and you learned the clarinet.
I know. I marvel. I hadn't realised there's things called brass bands. I'd heard of them in passing.
Don't wash your mouth out. That's a disgrace.
That's good. No, there's brass bands all around us. Every little suburb and village had a brass band.
Yeah, you just had to be different, didn't you?
Yeah,
you
yeah.
just had to be different.
That's right.
Well, in this, we were chatting to a lovely lady, Mary Campbell, in the a few episodes ago, and in your areas of Yorkshire and that, would there have been the same sort of killing? Would there have been the same sort of dropping into each other's
No, people
houses?
in
and
Yorkshire are too miserable to kill.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Would you have to bring your own tea bag or your own scoop of tea or
They
something?
wouldn't have opened the door to you.
Oh, that's
chased
not
you.
true.
Well, one of the things is that people in an industrial town like Huddersfield worked, and you might start work at 7 and finish at 7, and you did that 5.5, 6 days a week. So there was very little time to be gossiping, or as they call it in Yorkshire, calling.
Never heard that.
Callan,
Callan.
which is so close to Killian.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I just had a TV program where 2 people were talking, Yorkshire people, and they said, "What are those 2 people doing?" And he said, "They're calling."
Callan, okay.
Yeah,
I've never heard of that.
And it's years since I heard that.
Yeah, okay.
Oh,
right.
Talking,
Right.
a killing.
Look what you missed. Look what you missed.
I know.
Had he known he would have been a brass player, had there been people Callan or Killian in
Yeah,
his house, they would have
absolutely,
introduced him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we had family as well, a close family with all these aunts and uncles who were still alive from on my dad's side and my mum's side. So Sundays were usually spent in a relative's living room, sipping tea and calling.
Callan, I
Yeah.
love it.
And we were talking about that just before we came in. So my memories of visiting with my mum to my maiden aunts was of being perched in a chair in the corner of the room,
Mm-hmm.
and if you twitched, sit still, Sit still. Don't twidget. Don't fidget. So, they're exciting times.
Yeah. Being a child in the 50s. Yeah.
Great, yeah. Well, listen, Mike, that's been brilliant. Thanks for your family stories and the stories of your maiden aunts and your early years. Good to see you again, and thanks a lot. So we're going to continue with a traditional Irish song made famous by the Furies called. And Gerda, were you ever 16? And when you were 16, were you ever sweet?
Always.
Well,
Still am.
Here's Philea Sophia featuring the fabulous sweet Gerarda McCann with When You Were Sweet 16.
When first I saw the love light in your eyes, I thought the world held naught but joy for me. And even though we drifted far apart, I never dreamed but what I dreamed of thee. I love you as I never loved before. Since first I saw you on the village green. Come to me, oh my dream of love is o'er. I love you as I love you when you were sweet, when you were sweet 16. When first I saw the love light in your eyes, I thought the world held naught but joy for me. And even though we drifted far apart, I never dreamed but what I dreamed of thee. I love you as I never loved before. Since first I saw you on the village green. Should old acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind? Should old acquaintance be forgot and auld lang syne? For auld lang syne, my dear, for auld lang syne, we'll take a cup of kindness yet for auld lang syne. We too have run about the slopes and picked the daisies fine, but we've wandered many a weary foot for auld lang syne. For auld lang syne, my dear, for auld lang syne, we'll take a cup of kindness yet for auld lang syne. We too have paddled in the stream from morning sun till dine, but seas between us broad have roared for auld lang syne. For auld lang syne, my dear, for auld lang syne, we'll take a cup of kindness yet for auld lang syne. That most poignant of all Robbie Burns' songs brings us to the end of our journey around the girls we left behind. Once again, huge thanks to the Good Relations Department of Fermanagh and Omagh District Council.